Christina, thank you so much for coming here today and sharing your journey with us. Now tell us the first time that you received your cancer diagnosis. What thoughts went through your mind?
I received the diagnosis in August 2021, and in May 2021, we lost a close family member to breast cancer. It was a difficult journey, and I think we were still coming out of that because she was very young as well. So when I received this diagnosis, I can't even say if I was shocked. It was almost a strange kind of acceptance because it's just happened. It happened unexpectedly. It happened to someone we would never have thought it would happen to. So why am I surprised now? Clearly, this exists in the world, kind of thing. I know it sounds profound and weird, but it really was how I felt. It was simply like saying, okay, so this is happening now. And for my son and my husband, we were there at the time when I got the call. They were totally, they were shocked and they were so upset. And then they wondered what was happening to me because I seemed so calm. I just sat them down and we spoke about it. And I felt calm. I can't even account for it. But the reason I mentioned that context was to say, maybe it had come out of that, to say this kind of thing happens. It never gives you a notice to say, in a week's time, you're going to receive a diagnosis, so prepare yourself. No, it just appears. And I think the first thing I thought was, this is happening. Okay.
Now, I know your faith has been a defining factor in how you've managed this diagnosis. Tell us a little more about that.
So we often, hear that belief informs behavior. The things that you feed your life with, the things you hold on to, the tenets of your life, as it were, those things inform your behavior. And for me, I saw that reality during this journey because I cannot separate my life and my actions from my faith. So when I received that diagnosis, the first thing I did was tell myself, this will be okay because of my faith, because of God, because of the time I spend in the Word of God and hearing teachings and encouraging myself. Because faith is not just about, for me, it's not just about a vague belief that says, I believe in God. But I needed to define that belief. And how do you educate yourself in what you believe in? And for me, that was important because in educating myself regarding my faith, there were a lot of things I learned and came to understand in the Word that helped me with the journey, to remind me I was not alone, I was not abandoned, I was not being punished. So in that way, my belief really dictated how I behaved in all of this.
That's amazing. So take us through some of the treatments that you underwent for breast cancer. And how did you feel when you finally rang that bell?
So what I did discover over time, that breast cancer is not breast cancer, is not breast cancer. In that time, I had, in my circles, there were 4 women, very close. We were very close in our friendship. All 4 of us had breast cancer. All 4 of us had a different type and a different treatment plan. And often people, in their attempt to encourage you, will say, I will get so-and-so to speak to you. They have the same experience. They will tell you what to expect. It doesn't work like that. It's so unique. Treatment plans are so unique. So initially, I was diagnosed with a tumor on the left side. And the day before I was to start chemo, my oncologist called me to say, we can't start yet. There's been a development. You now have cancer on the right side. It's a different type. It's a different stage. So we need to go back to the drawing board. So that was the one challenge. The plan then was to have 6 sessions of chemo. And then because the cancer was what they call triple positive for hormones, there was progesterone, estrogen, which is, our part of our normal makeup, and then HER2, which is another type of hormone. These were factored into that diagnosis. So because of that, the treatment plan was focused accordingly. So I had 6 chemo treatments, and thereafter I had to take a hormone blocker for another 12 weeks. When that was done, I had to undergo surgery, which was bilateral mastectomy with reconstruction. Then I had 31 sessions of radiation, and thereafter it was just continuing with the checkups and screening and that until in January 2023 I was declared cancer-free. So that was great excitement. The chemo, it was interesting. So I'd realized I can be a bit slow at noticing some things. I realized that there was this bell that was placed there. And when you finish your last session of chemo, you ring that bell to say, yeah, you're done. I was so exhausted at that last session. All I wanted to do was leave. So I completely forgot to ring the bell. But these infusions, these hormone blockers that I was taking every 3 weeks, when it was the last hormone blocker, at that point, I remembered I need to ring this bell. It was so exciting to say, I'm never going to have to be back in here. This is done. I'm still standing. It's over. This part of this journey is over. And it is exhilarating. You're ready to take on anything else that may come thereafter.
And I know that the rest of your family was also elated about this news. But Christina, less than a year later, and you were hit with another diagnosis.
Yes, that came out of the bright blue. So the surprise that I didn't experience the first time, I certainly experience now. What had happened was last year in August, during one of my visits, my oncologist picked up a little node under the left clavicle. It didn't seem to be anything sinister at the time, and we were monitoring it. We were carefully monitoring it. I'm grateful. My oncologist just never leaves anything to chance. She's so particular about with her attention to all of this. So I'd had it scanned and screened and sonored and whatever else there is to be done, and it looked perfectly innocent. When I saw her in April this year, she said to me, I'm still not satisfied with this. Let's have it biopsied. And we did, and discovered that it was malignant. So when she called me with that, I was thrown off course, because while I understand cancer metastasizes, it returns, it does all of those things, I didn't expect it to be so soon. So she scheduled me to have a PET scan done. And when she got the results, she called me to say that in addition to that little node under the left clavicle, I also have a spot at the base of the skull that it has moved to. I was surprised. And then I thought, how inconvenient, because I have other things to do. So it sounds ridiculous and unbelievable, but that's really how I felt. Because for me, the cancer was an event. It wasn't my life. My life was happening all around it. And I didn't want it. It was an inconvenience. So I gathered myself and I said to her, okay, Doc, it's here again. What do we do? What is the plan? And I think for me, that is what helps me as well, to realize there's always a plan. There's a way forward. There's always a way, but it must always be forward. Because sometimes the way can be backwards. I don't want to do that. It has to be forward, always forward.
Now, are there not people around you saying, come on, Christina, let's be real? You are just putting on a front, a wall, and trying to restrain what exactly is happening to you?
Absolutely. The first time and this time. Everybody has trust issues. And I say, but why? I have not given you reason to doubt me. I've come through it the first time. We can do this again. And I had a conversation with my son recently, and he says, I feel like you're not telling me everything. And I said to him, I would not do that to you because I wouldn't want you to do that to me. If you're hurting, if you're struggling, if you're in a valley experience in your life, I don't want you to keep it from me. I want you to be open and honest with me so we can walk the journey together. So I would not do this to you. So when I say I am well, yes, I am annoyed, I am not making this up. I am not fearful because I have to believe there's always a way forward. If I don't have that belief, and if I don't behave in a way that compounds that belief, what am I going to do? Because this is not something I have control over. But the things I can control, the way I feel about it, the way I will conduct myself through it, to remain healthy, to remain fit, to not be reckless, all of those things I can control. So because I take those things in hand, I can safely say, I really am fine.
There's a saying, what doesn't break you makes you stronger. How has this experience made you more resilient?
It's interesting, from the first time that I received the diagnosis, I was curious. After all the noise and the emotion had subsided, I was curious as to what the purpose of this was. Because bad things happen in life to all of us. Whether we're good people or bad people, that is not the point. It happens to all of us. And the way we deal with these things has a lot to do with how we come out at the end of it. Because I don't believe that suffering, if you want to call it that, is forever. It's for a time, you go through it, you come out on the other side of it. And this is something that I came to experience firsthand. And a huge factor for this was having a sound mind or a strong mind. And it helped me to keep my wits about me. It helped me to not cloud my mind with unnecessary information. Typically, I didn't do a lot of research the first time around because I didn't want to come to all sorts of conclusions I did not have the knowledge to make. I'm not a clinical person. I'm not a medical person. What would I know? Even if I read something, I would not understand it properly. So all of those things I felt would cloud my mind. I didn't want to research. I went by what my clinician said. If I was uncertain, if I had a question, I would ask. Or when I didn't, I just followed instructions. So I felt that that sound mind was important for me to know when to go and do the research, when to step back, when to be quiet, when to process what was going on. And I think that awareness, it led to a self-awareness that was very important for me in that whole experience.
Okay. I find some women prefer to keep the diagnosis private and others like their friends and family to know about it. How did you manage the relationships around you during this time?
I have discovered that as well over time, but for me, the two things were very important. This is not something you can keep a secret because I have sisters that I'm extremely close to. I love dearly. I have nieces in my family. I have sisters-in-law. There are all these people to whom this information is valuable. Yes, it's a risk because sometimes when you share too much of information, you invite too much of feedback, and you don't want that kind of thing when you're going through a treatment. So, firstly, this was not a secret. My diagnosis was known to the family, and how we managed the inquiries and that, it was a simple practical thing. My husband, again, created a WhatsApp group with the close family and friends, and he gave regular updates. But people couldn't respond on the group because that would have been a nightmare to manage, just to give everyone updates, and they shared the information. But no one contacted me directly because I needed a clear head. So The other thing that was likely helpful for me was that I lived away from the greater part of the family, so I wasn't inundated with visitors and that. It also becomes a risk, with infections and low immunity and all of that kind of thing. But I didn't, on the face of it, did not want to keep it a secret. We need to share these things. We need to have these conversations. It brings understanding. It brings awareness, because it can happen to anyone at any time in your life.
Do you ever have a low day when you say, why? Why is this happening to me?
The one distinct incident I can speak to is when I received feedback post-surgery. And I felt like the breast surgeon wasn't confident that they had got all of the cancer. At that point, I was upset. I felt like we haven't won. And there's a likelihood I might not be here for my kids. And I don't know if they were ready for that. So then, yes, I hit a really low point then. But once again, the strong mind, I gathered my thoughts. I wrote down the things that concerned me. I left it a day or two. I looked at it again. And I said, okay, are these really the things that worry you? What else is there? And when I was satisfied with my inquiry, I wrote to the surgeon and said, please answer these questions for me. And when she did, I felt better. So even when you have a low day, it can't just be, it has to be productive. Something has to come out of there to direct you towards an answer. And yes, I thought I would be over it, and here it is, back again. But I think because of that approach, I feel better about dealing with it now. I don't feel like I'm going to die. I'm not leaving my kids. We'll go through this again. My mind is clearer. I am more aware. I have a better understanding of the process. So I'm ready.
What's the way forward? I know you've delayed your treatment a bit just so you can get all your visits in order with your family and friends. What's the next step?
So initially, it had been hoped that we could address this with radiation. But due to the nature of the cancer and the fact that it was on both sides, I had had a lot of radiation the last time. Clinical people will cringe at that expression, a lot of radiation, but there it is. As a result, it was not advisable to do radiation now. So I will go back onto 6 cycles of chemo, and I will take the hormone blockers indefinitely. And we will assess it from there. And I know typically the kids want to know, but what are the outcomes? What can we expect? And I said, let's deal with this now. This is what we have to do. I am not investing all my thought and energy into a process I have no clinical understanding of. I am blessed to have these clinicians. They're the best in their field. At a recent conference, oncology conference, all of them were keynote speakers, and I realized, wow, I really had the best people taking care of me. So let me leave it to them. I have other things to worry about. I want to do new things. I want to develop my career. I want to learn new things. I have other tasks that I am focusing on. So let me do that. Let the clinical people do their bit.
Has cancer changed the way you live every day?
Absolutely. Absolutely. In the strangest ways. So I'm not ready to go skydiving and all those amazing things. But it has changed my personality. I have become kinder in a way that causes great suspicion in my family. Because they know I've always been a very forthright person, very hard nut to crack, not very patient and tolerant. I am becoming a rather nice person. They don't believe it. And I tell you what, I learned that over this time. And it's interesting. For me, the journey was about growth. It was about um, it was about development. It wasn't just about healing. I learned tolerance. People say the strangest things to you because, let's face it, they don't know what to say. When a close friend of mine told me about her diagnosis, I was at a loss for words, but I chose to say exactly that. I don't know what to say to you. And she said, I understand. But then you get people who just want to say something and then say the weirdest things. And people who have their views and their opinions of what you should do, not having gone through the experience themselves, but theoretically they feel you should do these things. And I learned not to be offended.
Give us some examples of that.
Like somebody said to me, don't worry, when I initially got the diagnosis, do what you have to. If you have to remove those breasts, just do it and be done. Okay, I'll just do that then. But it's a huge decision for a woman. It changes, well, let me say, I thought it would change me fundamentally.
It's part of your identity as a woman.
Absolutely. And then when it was done, I realized I'm not any less of a woman. If anything, I'm much improved, I think. But the point is, it changed the way you receive from people, the way you perceive people, the way you deal with conversation. So personally, it was a huge grooming journey to be tolerant, to be understanding, to be compassionate. Nobody thinks you learn these things from a cancer diagnosis. But personally, I learned those things. I learned to be accepting, not to challenge all the time. I can still be a real pain, but I've learned acceptance that this is going to happen. The evidence is irrefutable. Let's deal with it. So those were great learning curves for me.
What is your advice to someone who has just been diagnosed with cancer for the first time?
The emotion is huge. You can't escape from that. But one of the biggest pitfalls, I think, is fear. Because the moment you are fearful, everything is going to be a struggle. When it came to the strong mind, I didn't know how to share that. I know I'm taking a roundabout route, but I will get to the answer. But it's important to say this. The strong mind, I didn't know how to share that outside the context of my faith. So I thought, are you a little delusional here? Maybe you're denying what's going on. And then I read a book recently. It's called Man's Search for Meaning. It's not a religious book. But in that book, the writer, Viktor Frankl, who is a psychologist, wrote about a strong mind in the midst of absolute devastating circumstances. And I realized it is possible. You can still dictate your attitude. You can choose. Everything is a choice. And in this journey for me, I realized the value of choice. I chose to have a strong mind. I chose to keep my wits about me. I chose not to be emotional because I realized that was not a road that would sustain me. I had to be sound. Yes, in that time I thought of my children, your mortality looks you straight between the eyes then. We always think our bodies are inconclusive until you come to realize that that's not the case. Your body can stop at some point. Your life can end at some point. But what is the value of contemplating the end and failing to live everything in between. So for me, I had to focus on that. So yes, while you go through the emotions, you can't stay in them because this condition is highly administrative. You've got to manage so many things. Things change, goalposts change. Just when you think you've overcome something, something else comes in the way. If you don't submit to the process while keeping your mind sound, it's going to be a challenge. And you can do that in various ways. For me, it was listening to the teachings of my faith. It was reading books that uplift. Not always books about cancer journeys, but other things, because you need to see that in every sphere of life, you find people who are victorious, who overcome. So the focus is important.
How do you reconcile your trust in God's sovereignty with the challenges that you're having to face?
That is a very interesting question, because it came to me earlier this year when I shared at a ladies' breakfast at our church. When we talk about the sovereignty of God, it's often in a kind of helpless way. We have no control. God will do what he will do. But I learned a different aspect to that sovereignty. So this issue of the strong mind, I realized, God, we occupy God's thoughts. There's a beautiful chapter in Psalm 139 that talks about how God sees us, how we were created, and the fact that we occupy his mind. Just like you as a mom, me as a mother, you've got young kids, Mel, but they're always on your mind. No matter how busy, and you are one busy person, they're always there, always in your thoughts. My kids are grown up, they're adults, but they still occupy my thoughts. And I thought, if on this human level that happens, in a divine level, how amazing is that, to think that we occupy the mind of God and he knows us so intimately. So when I look back at this journey and the people that have come into my sphere, especially those clinicians, they were people who had to know how to deal with me, because I have a strong mind and I don't want to be mollycoddled. I want you to tell me straight up what is going on here. How will I, what is the plan? What is expected of me? How will I react? I didn't want someone to comfort me. I needed somebody to be firm, because I am that way. And I found those were exactly the kind of people I had. I didn't choose them. They were chosen for me. But they were able to relate to the way I think. They were able to relate to the strength I have and tell me when to back down. And I needed people like that. So this was not a coincidence that these people came, in my sphere. And I believe that is how the sovereignty of God worked for me. Because while on the one hand, I could say, God is sovereign, he chose to give me cancer, I can do nothing about it. I chose to see instead, God is sovereign. I occupy his thoughts, and because he knows me so well and knows what a difficult person I am, he made sure the people in my sphere were as difficult and could put me in my place. Typically, when I had to have the reconstruction, I was not up for it. It was a lengthy op. I would be in bed for a while. I couldn't conceive of such a decision. And then when I saw the reconstructive surgeon, he says, oh, okay, yes, we'll do this. Yeah, we've got to have the mastectomy, then we'll do the reconstruction. It's a long process. You'll be in bed for a while, but you'll be fine thereafter. This is standard. I was gobsmacked. But I don't think it was a coincidence I encountered someone like that. Because if I encountered someone who shared my viewpoint, I would never have gone through with it. Somebody had to challenge me, and he said to me, I guarantee you, if you don't do this now, you will come back in a year and ask me to do it for you. So do it now and be done. And that's how it happened. So that's how the sovereignty of God has played out in my life.
So, Christina, from what I'm hearing, perception is really important in how we handle the challenges that we're faced with.
Absolutely. That has certainly been my experience. I read a very interesting analogy recently that talks about suffering or challenges as having the same effect or behavior like the way gas does. To explain, if you release a little amount of gas into a room, irrespective of how big that room is, the gas will permeate that entire room. And the analogy was that suffering or challenges are that way for us as humans as well. When it enters our life, it tends to permeate and take over our whole lives. Everything we experience is tainted by that struggle. And something I've come to also realize is that people seem to think that their struggle is less important than somebody else's.
Or more important.
Or more important for that matter. You're absolutely right. But there is no hierarchy to suffering. It doesn't matter whether I have cancer or the next person has a mental issue or somebody else is dealing with some other condition. In our lives, that struggle permeates our whole lives, every part, body and soul. So, on the one hand, we can't dismiss what we are going through as being less important or more important than what somebody else is going through. But we do need to acknowledge that this is happening and that it needs to be dealt with. And I think that those were the many things that I learned so unexpectedly from this journey. Understanding to deal with the issues we have, understanding to face them and work through them, understanding that everyone is dealing with something. And this is why this issue of compassion and understanding and tolerance is so important.
Christina, thank you so much for sharing your personal journey with us. Your strength and resilience are truly inspiring, and I know it's going to provide hope to many, many people out there.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And in saying thank you, the last addition from me, gratitude is a winning solution. Gratitude in everything, because when you look through all that you go through, you cannot miss the things you have to be grateful for. And that's what has been a foundational for me as well. So thank you.
Awesome.